Have you ever heard the voice of silence? The one that only comes when the mind stops screaming and the universe finally whispers the truth. A forgotten book, hidden for centuries, promises to reveal this hidden frequency, the key to awakening your deepest potential and recognizing your true spiritual nature. Written by HELENA Blavatsky. The Voice of the Silence is not just a mystical text, it's a map to the soul, a cartography of consciousness that connects quantum science with the most ancient esoteric knowledge. Today you will discover the secret of the 7 portals, the power of the silver thread, and why the mind must be overcome in order for the real to be perceived. But are you ready to hear what only silence reveals? Chapter 1. The Science of Silence and Sound Without Sound. At the heart of HELENA Blavatsky's most enigmatic teachings lies a concept that defies not only ordinary logic, but the very nature of human perception. The sound that cannot be heard, known as the voice of nothingness. This sound without sound, as described in The Voice of the Silence, is not just a spiritual metaphor, but a real vibrational access point to levels of consciousness beyond the ordinary mind. Blavatsky doesn't present it as a symbol, but as an inner resonant frequency, an essential vibration that pulses at the core of the being and can only be picked up when the mind is completely still. This silence is not the absence of sound, but a field of pure presence, where all forms of noise cease, a space where consciousness connects with its cosmic origin. Modern physics, by looking at the quantum field, is beginning to recognize that there is a basal frequency in the vacuum of the universe, a subtle energy that vibrates even when everything seems to be at rest. Could this be the same vibration perceived by the Indo-Tibetan initiates with whom Blavatsky claims to have studied? According to her accounts, the soundless sound is the vibrational signature of the inner divinity, the soul's silent call to its primordial source. In a world saturated with stimuli, this call becomes almost inaudible, covered up by the incessant mental noise. However, it never disappears. It remains latent, waiting for the moment when the seeker is ready to hear it. This point marks a profound break with conventional religious traditions that teach one to seek outside oneself. Instead, Blavatsky directs attention inwards to the hidden center where the soul whispers its eternal truth. This sound, inaudible to physical ears, is the same as the Sanskrit nada Brahma, the primordial word that vibrates through creation. It is the echo of the absolute within the relative, the vibrational bridge between the finite self and the infinite. Its perception does not depend on effort, but on surrender, as it can only be accessed when the ego becomes silent and presence is fully established. It is at this moment that the initiate crosses the threshold of the rational mind and enters the field of direct perception, where there is no longer any doubt, where truth reveals itself not as a concept, but as a living experience. This soundless sound, Blavatsky teaches, is not just a spiritual phenomenon. It is the vibrational architecture of reality and the key that connects all beings to the universal matrix of consciousness. Chapter 2. The Inner Map and the Awakening. For dormant faculties, Blavatsky did not offer The Voice of the Silence as a theoretical treatise or a collection of mystical aphorisms, but as a true navigational map for those ready to traverse the invisible worlds of consciousness. She doesn't present herself as an author, but as a translator of fragments preserved by the Indo-Tibetan mystery schools, which guard a lineage of wisdom that predates all organized religions. These fragments, taken from the Book of Golden Precepts, are practical guidelines for inner transmutation, not through belief, but through direct experience. What she describes is spiritual engineering, a precise set of instructions designed to activate dormant capacities of human consciousness, many of which remain invisible and inaccessible to those who live trapped in conventional mental patterns. Modern neuroscience confirms that the brain has latent neural networks that activate in deep states of meditation, resonating with the esoteric notion that there are subtle abilities waiting to be awakened. The text offers exact milestones, points of transition between levels of perception, and warns against psychic illusions that masquerade as spiritual progress. Blavatsky clearly distinguishes between mental phenomena and authentic realizations, teaching that many are lost in mind games, mistaking visions, voices, and insights for true wisdom. "The mind is the killer of reality," she writes with surgical precision, pointing to the root of human suffering: identification with mental contents. To overcome this prison, it is necessary to learn to observe thoughts without merging with them, a teaching echoed in contemporary mindfulness practices, but whose origins lie in the most ancient traditions of the East. Blavatsky's innovation was to synthesize these ancient principles into a language that spans time, accessible to mystics and scientists alike. In offering this map, she did not promise an easy journey, but a real one. The path, according to her, requires discipline, discernment, and surrender. Each stage requires an abandonment, not of possessions, but of illusions, and the courage to cross the shadow zones where the ego dissolves. The prize is not power, but vision, the ability to see beyond form, to recognize in the other the self, and in the whole the primordial unity from which we emerge. This map, therefore, is not a philosophical proposal, but a refined spiritual technology, a manual for activating what mystics call the eyes of the spirit, allowing the seeker to perceive the world not as scattered fragments, but as a living organism of sacred interconnections. Have you ever felt that there is more to our perception of reality than we can access with our ordinary senses? Comment below with your thoughts on how Blavatsky's teachings can help awaken subtle capacities of consciousness and activate a deeper vision of existence. Chapter 3. Mental Illusion and the Echo of Digital Shadows. As we delve deeper into the teachings of the Voice of the Silence, we find a warning that resonates with disconcerting timeliness. The mind, instead of being an ally, can become the greatest obstacle to spiritual realization. Blavatsky states that the mind is like a reality simulator, a mechanism that, by filtering all experiences through beliefs, conditioning, and identities, builds an invisible prison where the individual believes he or she is free. This prison is not built with walls, but with thoughts. She warns that even spiritual experiences can be co-opted by the mind, turning into images, concepts, or beliefs that distance the seeker from their essence. In her visionary critique, she anticipates what we now call cognitive bubbles, reinforced by digital algorithms that capture attention and feed recurring mental patterns, preventing true inner silence. Digital platforms amplify mental proliferation, creating a constant stream of stimuli that traps consciousness in noise. This, far from expanding perception, fragments it. Today's seekers face not only the internal challenges of the mind, but a structure that systematically prevents pausing, listening, and deep contemplation. In this context, Blavatsky's teaching for the disciple to kill the killer, that is, transcend the mind as identity, takes on an urgency never seen before. She describes that this process begins by observing thoughts without identifying with them, allowing a space of pure consciousness to emerge between the observation and the mental content. As this silent space expands, it reveals a dimension of perception that doesn't depend on words or images, but on an intuitive wisdom that arises from silence itself. Thus, practice ceases to be an escape from the world and becomes a reintegration, a return to the essence that has always been there, but has been obscured by the incessant whirlwind of thoughts. The mind in this new stage is not discarded, but placed at the service of the greater consciousness. When thought quiets down, direct knowledge emerges not as an idea, but as a living presence. And it is in this presence that the seeker recognizes that true wisdom cannot be taught, only revealed. Through the silence that contains everything. Chapter 4. The 7 Keys to Awakening and the Transformation of the Soul. At the center of the path outlined in The Voice of the Silence is a set of 7 spiritual portals known as paramitas, transcendent virtues, that do not function as moral commandments, but as frequencies of consciousness that, when activated, completely reconfigure the being. Blavatsky presents these virtues as living forces, each corresponding to an essential stage in the process of enlightenment. The first, Dana, transcendental generosity, breaks with the paradigm of accumulation and redirects the flow of vital energy towards sharing. The second, Shila, pure ethics, goes beyond obedience to external rules. It demands complete harmony between thought, word, and deed, eliminating the internal dissonance that drains spiritual energy. Kshanti, the third virtue, manifests itself as a luminous patience that is not passive, but active, the ability to maintain clarity even in the midst of provocation. In a society that glorifies reactivity, Kshanti offers the stability of a mind that is not shaken by chaos. The fourth key, Viraga, is detachment from emotional reactivity, a freedom that doesn't deny feelings, but welcomes them without being overwhelmed by them. It is an equanimity that sees through impermanence and allows everything to flow without leaving any residue. Virya, the fifth paramita, represents a spiritual energy, born of alignment with inner truth, different from egoic willpower. When actions express the true essence of being, energy arises spontaneously, sustaining any challenge effortlessly. The sixth key dhyana is meditation as a permanent state of consciousness, where mindfulness is not an exercise but a natural quality of the awakened being. And finally, prajna, transcendental wisdom, which allows us to perceive reality directly without the mediation of the conceptual mind, while simultaneously seeing the interdependence of all phenomena. These 7 virtues are not steps on a linear ladder, but interactive force fields that develop synergistically, shaping a new way of being in the world. Blavatsky doesn't present them as unattainable ideals, but as real and measurable capacities available to all who walk the path with sincerity. By cultivating these virtues, the seeker not only transforms their individual experience, but also changes their vibrational frequency, silently influencing the collective field of consciousness. This is the true power of the paramitas, not an imposed morality but a sacred geometry of inner development, whose curves lead to the recognition that the soul does not need to be saved, only awakened. Chapter 5. The choice between personal liberation and the Bodhisattva path. Within the teachings of The Voice of the Silence, Helena Blavatsky presents us with a profound dilemma that silently divides the modern spiritual world, the path of individual enlightenment and the path of compassionate renunciation. At a time when spiritual practices are often reduced to tools for personal comfort, success, and well-being, Blavatsky rescues an uncomfortable and transformative truth that true fulfillment lies not in freeing oneself from the world, but in remaining in it with lucidity to alleviate the suffering of others. The Buddhist tradition calls this second path a bodhisattva one, who even when faced with the possibility of achieving total liberation, chooses to stay and serve. The bodhisattva recognizes that there is no separation between self and other, between individual awakening and collective evolution. Blavatsky provokes contemporary spirituality by exposing that the search for peace, prosperity, and spiritual growth can paradoxically be a new kind of selfishness. She writes that the fruit of renunciation is sweeter than peace won only for oneself. In this call, we see an inversion of values. Spirituality is no longer about what I can achieve, but about what I can offer. The path of the Bodhisattva is not made up of heroic gestures, but of a silent commitment to the truth and to humanity. It is a practice of active compassion, where the suffering of others is not seen as someone else's tragedy, but as a part of oneself crying out for light. Blavatsky describes this path as the highest as it transcends the desire for escape and embraces the paradox of presence being awake in the world, but not being of the world. The Bodhisattva does not serve out of obligation, but out of clarity. His compassion is not pity, but direct perception of universal interconnectedness. In choosing this path, the seeker does not sacrifice his enlightenment, he deepens it, because he recognizes that true light is not consumed, but multiplies when shared. Have you ever wondered whether true spiritual fulfillment lies in seeking individual enlightenment, or in serving the collective? Comment below your reflections on the Bodhisattva path, and how active compassion can transform our understanding of spirituality and human evolution. Chapter 6. The Silver Thread and the Indissoluble Connection with the Divine. At the heart of Blavatsky's doctrine is a powerful and deeply consoling symbol, the silver thread. This invisible link which connects individual consciousness to the cosmic whole cannot be broken. Even when we are lost in illusion, plunged into the darkness of doubt, or alienated from our essence, this thread remains intact, silently sustaining the possibility of return. She teaches that this thread is more than a spiritual metaphor, It is a vibrational reality, a channel of consciousness through which sudden intuitions, spontaneous understandings, and feelings of inexplicable connection flow. It represents the part of us that has never strayed far from the source, the divine spark that watches in silence, even when we identify with the turmoil of the mind and the dramas of the ego. Blavatsky instructs, "Fix your soul on the star whose ray you are." This phrase is more than poetry. It's a direct call to remember our origin. When attention is turned to this thread, a new perception emerges, an inner listening that does not depend on words, a wisdom that is not taught but recognized. In modern terms, this thread can be compared to the quantum field of consciousness, where all information and all possibility coexist, awaiting the observer's alignment. As we align with it, life begins to respond with synchronicities, meaningful encounters, and unexpected revelations. Intuition intensifies, and the feeling of being in the right place at the right time ceases to be coincidence and becomes evidence. The silver thread is therefore a bridge between the lower self and the higher self, between the dense world of form and the subtle field of spirit. Its constant presence reminds us that we are never really alone, and that even in the darkest moments, guidance is available to those who are quiet enough to listen. Blavatsky offers us a key to finding this thread inner silence. Not the silence of soundlessness, but the silence of awakened presence, where the mind is silent and the being shines. In this space, the silver thread pulses like a sacred call, inviting us to remember who we really are. Throughout this video, we delve into the profound teachings of the voice of the silence, exploring the paths to individual liberation, the bodhisattva ideal, and the silver thread that eternally connects us to the divine. Helena Blavatsky left us more than words. She gave us a map for the awakening of consciousness. And now we want to hear from you. What struck you most about this teaching? Do you feel this invisible connection with something greater? Comment below and share your reflections with our community. If this content resonated with your journey like this video, send it to someone who needs to hear these messages and subscribe to the channel. This helps us to keep bringing you topics that enlighten, provoke, and transform. May the voice of silence continue to echo within you. Until next time.